ever see these movements as only emerging out of 2015 when students called for road to fall. And for these movements to learn from the generation of Tiro, the generation of Sobukwe, Biko, and other black luminaries who came before and actually fought against the system and paid a heavy price, that today we are breathing this air of freedom, but we know that people died for us to be here. And we must never ever compromise and actually forge ahead in building this country and making sure that our people get a better deal at the table. So in breathing this air of freedom, I'm inviting us into Black consciousness. I'm inviting us to read into Black consciousness. I'm inviting us to live into Black consciousness, to actually say to us that Black consciousness is not difficult. It's not difficult to comprehend. That's why Biko and Tiro and all these other comrades' philosophy was able to spread like wildfire, because Black consciousness begins with us. Whether you're in a township, you're in a village, you're in the inner city, Black consciousness is about saying, how can I be of service to Black lives? How can I be of service to Black humanity? Black consciousness is about saying Black lives matter, and what can I do to improve the condition of Black people? You know, scholars like John Henry Clark teach us to say that as Africans, we have no friends. We must always look upon ourselves to improve our situation. So breathing the air of freedom is also about accountability as leaders. As we can see what's happening in the Zondo Commission, what's happening in the country with regard to PPEs, COVID-19, and how our leaders are misappropriating funds. It's about being accountable to say, how do we go from being struggle icons? How do we go from liberation people to going into looters? And we need to question ourselves. And as parties like Azapo, we're also part of the Malays, because this is our country. It's not just the country of the ANC because they're in power or they're in office. This also falls upon us to say, what are we doing in our little corners? What are we doing in our communities to educate the young people about corruption and how not working in the public service is derailing the Black community? Because when you drive that Mercedes Benz, when you are part of the Wabenzi, you are not only doing it for your friends, but you are hurting the Black community. So how do we hold our leaders accountable? How do we become accountable to each other when we have a Black radical tradition of Lekotla in Bizo, a space where chiefs were held accountable? How do we hold our leaders accountable so that we do not reproduce personality cults across the continent where it's about leaders and what they want instead of the people? Breathing the air of freedom is about learning and learning from different traditions, not only being comfortable to say, I am Black consciousness, so I will not read the literature of Pan-Africanism, I will not read the literature of Afrocentricity, I will not read the literature of Afro-pessimism, I will not read the literature of other radical Black traditions. We must understand that learning is not only education, it's not only in the classroom, it's in the streets, it's in the shabin, it's everywhere for Black people. We learn from our grandmothers, we learn from our mothers, and we must also understand that the textbook is not the only way to learn. Through talking to people, through engaging with each other, through making sure that we go to our communities. Let's launch books in Black communities. Let's do memorial lectures in our Black communities. Let's stop with the glitz and glamour and go into the countryside and the townships. Breathing the air of freedom is about activism. We as scholars, as teachers, we must become scholar activists. We must start our own Black historical organizations. I mean, I'm looking at the historical profession right now and saying to myself, I can't. I have to organize with other Black scholars so that we can find our own historical society. Because at the moment we have the Southern African Historical Society, and it's a white society, even though it's changing. But for me, I want an apologetically black society of historians and scholars coming together and being free, because Steve Biko and his generation taught us that sometimes you have to close ranks and be amongst yourselves so that you can hear yourselves and you can be free to speak without being policed. Because when we see white people in our midst, sometimes we perform for them, we perform for whiteness, and we forget ourselves as black people. Breathing the air of freedom is about healing, comrades. It's about healing. It's about making sure that we reconcile. Azapo itself had problems with the UDF and other ANC movements in the 1990s, when it was a time of black on black violence. And it really calls upon us to actually come together as organizations and reflect upon what happened. Because I think too often when we talk about Reconciliation Day, it's a black and white thing, but it's not really a black on black conversation where we actually come together and actually speak about the 80s and what comrades did to one another, how movements sabotaged each other, how movements destabilized each other, and how the Black consciousness movement was also destabilized in the 1980s. And it's a very important conversation that needs to be had. And for us to heal, to say, for us to heal, we need to find closure. So another thing is that we need to build our nation as we breathe this air of freedom. This air of freedom came at a heavy cost, comrades. And for us, it's very important that we understand that we need to build our country. Whether as historians, we must use our gift to actually go into our communities and capacitate. Because my job is not simply to write history textbooks. My job is to conscientize and actually say to my fellow historians to say, let's go into our communities and do workshops so that next time someone else will write, even if he doesn't have a university degree, because we cannot wait for certification. People like John Henry Clark taught us that you don't need a PhD to write Black history, and they've done a lot for Black history without getting the PhD. They got the PhD at a later age. The scholars like Sheikh Anta Diop, Molefi Asante, the list is endless, but we need to learn from these scholars who are not popular. You don't find them as rockstar academics, but they actually chose the path of Black liberation, and they decided that we're going to write in spite of the prevailing dominant trends. So it's important for us to build this democracy in our rooftops, in our corners, in our spaces, and we must also remember that as a country, we've always leaned towards elitism, from our first movement to say it was always a case of educated people. And for me, I also want to challenge organizations like Azapo to say, please, when you invite people to come and speak at your events, also look at inviting people who don't have a matric, who don't have a grade 10, so that we get a balanced perspective and nuance from community members as well, so that people know that our history is not only the preserve of the elite. People like myself are privileged. We come from universities, we are university trained, so we are palatable. But we don't also want that. We want people who are unpalatable, so that we learn that history is not made by the elites, it's also made by the masses. If it wasn't for the masses, I wouldn't be able to stand in front of you here and speak like this, because we would still be fighting for our freedom. And this freedom did not come easy. So as I close, I just want to say, as I close, I just want to thank other scholars who have written about Nkgopotse Tiro. I'm not alone in the space of writing about Nkgopotse Tiro. People like Kgaogalelo Tiro, a nephew of Abraham Tiro, has written a book called Parcel of Death. It's available at bookstores across the country. Anne Heffernan has written an article about Nkgopotse Tiro. It's available online. She has also written a book called Limpopo's Legacy. Otsile Ntsoane and Polisi Ndlovu have written a book and have included Nkgopotse Tiro in it, about Botswana and the liberation struggle. Another person who's really pushing the legacy of Nkgopotse Tiro is Lucky Boy Shameja Simeja. He's a scholar of Nkgopotse Tiro and he's actually doing research. I look forward to the day where he actually writes his work. He has developed a play about Nkgopotse Tiro, and there are numerous scholars, such as Steve Mukwena, who's done a documentary where he features people like Menozipho Machoba. So, in a sense, I'm glad that the legacy of Nkgopotse Tiro is alive, but more still needs to be done. There are lectures that are being done. The family as well is keeping the legacy alive with a memorial lecture, but more still needs to be done. We can never say we are done. We need to theorize, we need to write, we need to debate. You know, for me, it's important that we humanize Nkgopotse Tiro. In my own social biography, one of the questions I was asking people was, what other things did Nkgopotse Tiro do? And I was told that Nkgopotse Tiro was a normal human being. He was also mischievous as well. He would take a car and drive without a license because he's human. And we must also understand that our leaders are human beings, first and foremost, because sometimes we put so much on them, we forget that sometimes leadership is not easy. And we must also understand and bear with them and say, you know, if it was you, how would you have done things better? But also understanding that it was the circumstances of the time they were living in. So I really invite us to really read further and understand our Black history, because it's very important in this Black History Month to understand about the global Black diaspora, the Caribbean, other sites as well, you know, South America, North America. There's so much that we can learn from Black History Month, but also saying to us as Black South Africans to say, we also have September. It's something where we can also celebrate Black History Month as it's celebrated as Black Consciousness Month as well. But Black History Month is not only subjected to 1 month. It's alive every day. We carry it in our veins, and it's a point of reference for us. You know, when we talk about an African-centered perspective of history, we need to be aware that we are also there. We need to look for our scholars. One of the things I always do when I write, when I quote in my references, in my studies, I always look for Black people's contributions. I'm always told that Black people didn't write about this, but I always find them. I search, I look for their contributions, because we are there in the archives, we are there, and our voices matter as well. You know, I was reading about the SS Mendi, and one of the projects I want to do is actually take the SS Mendi and go into the families of the victims of the SS Mendi, where Black men drowned during the First World War, and actually tell these family stories, because we cannot simply abdicate our responsibilities. You know, as a generation, we must find our mission and fulfill it, because unfortunately, the struggle was not only done on the picket lines, it was also done in the lecture halls, in the classrooms. You know, for there to be June 16, there had to be Nkgopotse Tiro teaching in Soweto. There had to be comrades teaching in places like Kronstadt. So it's very important for us as Black intellectuals to serve our communities, to realize that you don't need to wait for funding to go into the Black community, to set up a projector, to actually go and lecture about Black history. You don't need to wait for invitation. Go into your communities and actually speak and engage with the people. And we must also bear in mind that our people have so much to teach us. You know, for some of us, we are doing what we call social history, because we believe that the history is not only about elites. The history is about the ordinary people and how they have made the history. So as we think about apartheid, as we think about oppression, we must also think about Black people and their value as well. You know, we must say to ourselves to say, yes, there were some people who were living against the odds of apartheid. So in closing, I just want to say to us this Black History Month to say, let us rededicate our efforts to understanding where we come from as a society, to also appreciating the efforts of our gallant heroes such as Nkgopotse Tiro, Steve Biko, Nozipho Machova, and all these other comrades who played their part in the struggle against apartheid, and to call upon the young people to actually write the history. You could be doing engineering, you could be doing mathematics, but if you're passionate about the story, write about it. We are here to assist. We are here to say, we are offering our services to the Black community to say, if you've got a story, talk to us, approach us. We are very approachable. We are not elitist. We want to work with our people so that their stories can be published, so that their stories can be heard and told. And we want to decolonize and actually say to publishers to say, look, leave the grammar alone. These are Black people and their stories deserve to be told. We're not here for the English. We're here for the knowledge so that our people, our grandchildren have a story to be told. Comrades, I thank you.
Very much, Comrade Mojuda Motame. I think that was quite a very passionate, but at the same time, elucidating talk you gave. Not only did you focus on the life of Tiro and the history that is generally written about, but you also gave us pointers about our current reality and how Tiro's ideas, how he speaks, how his speech still speaks to our present conditions. That air of freedom, we have to ask ourselves the question, are our people breathing that air of freedom that Nkgopotse Tiro had envisaged? And I think we will all agree here that we are not any close to breathing that air of freedom. The squalor is increasing, the poverty is increasing, lack of housing is increasing, our education system seems to be in shambles. And lectures like this remind us of the ideals that all our martyrs gave their life for. And we use them as aid memoirs to say, well, maybe I might be comfortable today, but when I leave my home just 200 meters from here, I see people living in shacks. The roads are impassable when it is raining like this. People are drowning and all of that. Yet this is 26 years later. We are in charge of government. We make the fiscal decisions. We make the policy decisions. And South Africa is not a poor country. We are a middle income country, and other middle income countries ensure that some of those basic facilities they give to their people. But let me thank you for laying the, I don't know if carpet is the right word, so that the other speakers who are lined up can also come in. At this moment, let me also acknowledge the presence of Ndate Welile Nhlapo. I did speak to Comrade Kadiete yesterday, and he suggested that because he has got some constraints about traveling, if he is not available to join us during this time in Mafikeng, he will ask Ndate Welile Nhlapo to share a bit with us about Tiro, because he worked very closely with him. He knew him personally. And as a former national organizer of SASO, he's got some deep insights about the life of Nkgopotse Tiro. But let me get to the next speaker, Nozipho Machova. As we know, she was very close to Tiro. Give an opportunity to also paint us a picture of who Tiro was and the kind of work they did together as a collective of students fighting for liberation. Sis Nosi, this is your time, this is your platform. Please share your insights and ideas with us about our hero and our martyr and your own friend, and probably, your friend and your contemporary. Thank you very much.
Dumelang kaofela. Akere la nkutlwa. Even though kicking the mask lang kutu.
Rahudwa.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Ke gore go na le batho mo montlong, so ka molao tshwanetse go kenywa di-mask.
No, thank you very much, and we commend you for observing the regulations.
Ntate Motlhamme, you laid down a nice background, not only Katiro, but about us Black people, starting with the American situation, where did Black man starts from. And we see that as Black people globally, we still have problems, asserting ourselves. BCM is basically to say that as a Black person, who you are, your own identity. When people change their identity, you lose yourself. You lose your identity. Your identity, you should say, this is what BCM was saying, define yourself. You have to define yourself and say that, na as Mercy Pomachova, who am I? And this thing, even we lost next to Gozage. I have now to go back and find out and we know we need to do that research as ourselves, as our families, just to know Okokai and have your feet on the ground. And that's very important when you have your feet on the ground. And all of that. And one of the things that BCM was very good at was the literacy training, which Bo Welile were involved in. Maybe he might talk about the literacy training. And I think that one of the things that we should do is to go back to that and teach our people. As we are teaching Black consciousness, we also should teach our people how to read and write appropriately, not to write where the cat sits on the mat or the cat set up the mat, but to teach them who they are and know themselves. So I see when we were growing up, there was a fashion of skin lightening, di cream tsene di senya batho difatlhego di retsa gore re tshwane le makgowa. And not only skin lightening, re stretcha di meriri, re itšha ditlhogo tse re stretcha meriri because you wanted to look different. This inferiority complex by instilling in our heads, it's so strong that we need to get rid of that. We need to come back to that and make sure you don't lighten your skin, you how stretchy muriri, you are beautiful as you are. When we were growing up, Nina Simon, Kanaki Impina Nina Simone, I'm black and I'm proud. The I'm black and I'm proud in a somebody to how each other was feeling. Kanko ya how eo sai shapang. Akere batho ba bang banka dinko tse tsa bone ba di reshape gore di tshwana le tsa mago. And yet you are changing yourself, you are changing who you are. When you do things like that and you look at your grandfather, you look at your mother, what do you say? No, na o haseme wa ka shaba gore o yang. And then nake yang, I'm improved. I'm self-improved or let me go back to Ndate Oribuanka Enega Jegutiro. Tiro was a very soft-spoken person, very humble and committed, and a Christian. I don't know if some people know Hore, ko kerekeng ba ile ba mo suspenda le ko kerekeng ya Sabata because on a politics and all of that. So some of those things are very important that people should know. Hore kereke le yone go suspendile monna. How not only ko sekolong ba go suspendile, le ko kerekeng ba go suspendile. He was a very powerful and committed person. I think even today, ko kerekeng ya Sabata, they say that they are still, divided. They could never, when you talk about Christianity and you talk about politics, hi, Yawana, they don't match. All you want to go to Gereking is to get money from people. And but anyway, Tiro, like I say, he was a very committed person and very humble and a very good speaker. He knew how to capture people. He knew how to make people listen. He knew how to make people understand, not only listen, but understand what he was saying and internalize what he was saying. And that was him, the way he used to talk. He was not on us screaming at people. I said the dramatics. He talked to people. He was one of the people, and people did understand what he was saying. He did not become the president, yes, overnight. He did not become ona bereka in the SASO, ona bereka le Rangwezi, Rangwezi Nangwekulu. And Rangwezi Nangwekulu is another person who is very committed, and when he talks the language that you would understand. I remember when he was banned, and Bamo Benezi ko Sibasa. Sibasa at that time was a very rural place and not very good. I remember when I went to visit him, Adula, in that forum, and you could see that people were watching him and doing all sorts of things. Sistemi, of course, but not Maburu. Sistemi, but Varona. But anyway, even under those circumstances, Abenilu, we managed to smuggle, I would say, smuggle him out of Sibasa into Botswana and Raymond Seko Sibasa. And I don't think Maburu will ever forgive us for that. How did we do that? How did we smuggle somebody who was banned from Kosibasa, rural area, Remukise, ko Botswana, aba across the border ko Botswana, and it was nice. It was nice to see when we left the country. I know I'm jumping from place to place. When we left the country, Bokwe Mafuna, Teokwe Mafule, Rangwesi Nengwekulu, and myself in 1973, we were supposed to go to Kokhale, where Tiro. That was the agreement. And then at that time, I think Tiro Jeff Pako were still in Botswana, working on the SASM project. And we were hoping that we will meet them go Kodinogana. When we left, we went to Kodinogana, and we were hoping we will meet Kodinogana, and we proceed to Botswana. But unfortunately, we couldn't meet Kahore. They were delayed to Botswana. But at that time, we knew Hore Tiro is going to be banned. And we left the message with the family that Tiro there's a banning order coming, because one of the people who worked for the office in Zahamangope came across a letter from Maburu, Bablela Mangope Hore, re tlo romela banning order e tlo banang Tiro, and just so you are aware, ba mo informa gore Tiro should be banished to Zeerust, ko a tsaletseng teng. So when we left, we knew we left the message, Hore Tiro is going to be banned, and that he should turn around and go back to Botswana, But Tiro, instead of going back to Botswana at that time, he now had to, again, he had to go legation to make sure that, o kwala o sa disapila, in a way. Osadisa pila, and then our kopana already had a copy of the banning order, but hey, you are going to be banned when and then you can't go back to Sirast and you cannot be rounding up your business. Ari middle and then after middle, you have to go to Botswana. But you know, on a sunset or Samaya anyway, because you can't wait for a banning order. Banning order is going to confine you for 5 years and you can't even move. So he was planning to go to Botswana. And he was already working go Botswana. But before then, Akerenele national organizer, after Ranwe Sinengwe Kulu was banned, so he became the national organizer, SASO. But when he was banned, we knew that he was going to be confined. There's nothing he can do. And then, of course, he was also working as a organizer go SASM. He had already established relationships with Botswana, Lesotho students. And when, you know, we also have to understand something. This is one of the things that you as APO have to inform the youth. You need to explain to them what is SASM, because SASM, you know, when we tell people what is SASM, they get blown away because they think that they are the only ones who started SADC. SASM was SADC, you know,
Okay.
in a way, you know.
Long before SADC was formed.
Long before SADC was formed, you know, the
Okay.
Southern African Student Movement. And basically, it was just to make sure that we understand what other students were facing. Kana rona nile bantu education. And we didn't get information from outside unless if re makamauto a rona re tsamaya re etsa that investigation, which Tiro and Jeff mainly was doing, because Jeff and I drive. So what happened was that we wanted to also compare and liaise with students from outside South Africa. For a reason, for another one, never na le di-lab ko university, because rona ha rena di-lab ko university. How do they start chemistry? How do they start biology? How do they do these things? And we also had to learn from them and compare with them. And it was an interesting journey that he was undertaking. He was learning a lot. And Southern African Student Movement was just that. It was launched in Botswana, and I remember, if I'm not mistaken, the first president, Yasazim Nelly, some Botswana woman, Joy Munatuk or something, and then after Joy, Tiro became the president. Yasazim, Southern African Student Movement. And then from there on, it was, coming from South Africa. Not that we had influencing the region. Let me call it the region, the Southern African state. It was the region, yeah. Not that we were trying to influence, but we were also trying to inform them what is going on in South Africa, and learning and taking information from these other countries back to South Africa that these students are doing. And it was going to be a powerful endeavor and a project. So when people talk about because of speech, it was not just the speech. I don't even want to talk about the speech, because people talk a lot about the speech. It was not because of the speech. The speech was the catalyst of a whole lot of things. It was a catalyst, like June 76, you know. It did not start in 1976. It started in 1972. Students doing what students do, and talking politics and informing people, Black consciousness, entrenching itself into the community through SASO, through BCP, through NAYO, you know. But the thing is that when we moved out of South Africa now, bringing in that region, the SADC region, that became very dangerous. And of course, our counterparts, our revolutionary counterparts also did not want that. They did not want that because then it will cut off the funding for other, for our counterparts. Counterparts, I don't know what you call them. But yeah, you know what I mean. So
Yeah, no, no.
it would cut down kahore. Now the world and the funders were beginning to ask, what is this Black consciousness movement? La re go etsagala eng? You know, ke bo mang batho ba ba Black consciousness, and they had to hide us. And you know, one of the things that uh, we believe, or one of the issues, one of the reasons that he was killed was because of his role in the SASM, Southern African Student Movement. I always have to say Southern African Student Movement so that people don't confuse it with South African Student Movement,
Yeah.
Yakudi High School. So
Yes,
I
yes.
always have to say it in full like that so that people, and unfortunately, when I'm Moemedi, is that most people don't get the difference.
You're
And
right. Yeah.
it is up to us to make sure that we continue with the teachings Sabo Steve Biko, Sabo Tiro, Sabo Mtuliga Shezi, we have to continue teaching. And I'm happy that I see young people now. I cannot be going around and talking to the students. But I can tell you that I remember one time Kilogo Vets, about 2 years ago, Kilogo Vets, looking for some Professor Govets. Ali ko building ya Robert Sobuke building Govets. And I was, you know how vets is when you don't know, especially when you are my age, around and around Parliament steps with I. So I asked these two ladies, Kiri, where is Robert Sobuke building? And I Basheva and Abatula. Fortunately, Negremi Mopela, and I didn't even know it was the building. And they were oh, key, Robert Sobuke. And I turned around and said, you know, let me just continue with my Black consciousness thing. Kerry, do you know who Robert Sobuke is? I'm asking these two ladies, students, COVID. By my Robert Sobuke. Kerry, do you know who Robert Sobuke is? Barry, I, I see that blank face, and
The
they
blank
have
stare. Yeah.
they have the cell phone, and I know they have Google on the cell phone. They can Google who Robert Sobuke is. Couldn't you? I don't know, but they did not know who Robert Sobuke is, and I told them that you should Google. But yeah, we will carry Robert Sobuke, just so you know. Robert Sobuke, Onaliko Robin Island. Do you know what Robin Island? Of course, by it's Robin Island. Mandela. So, Kiri, yeah, Onaliko Robin Island, and I explained the circumstances, how he got the throat cancer. And now they were beginning to say how, they were beginning to, but I was saying to myself, Gary, it's my fault that these kids don't know anything about Robert Sobuk. What
Yes.
is it that I'm doing to teach them for a Robert Sobuk in a man? After that, what's a CSC machine in a chemical students? What about CSC machine? No. How's I told her? No, Kari, no see for my job. You must do something.
Yes. Yes.
You
Yes.
must make sure that these children, well, not children, these students know about these important people in their lives. And Moemedi, it's your turn. It's you who is supposed to do these things. It's you who is supposed to tell the students. I mean, we lost our momentum, Kadi students. I
Okay.
see the other guys, they are targeting students and by recruited the students. Students are our students. Well, I'm not claiming them or anything like that, but that's where we started.
Yes.
That's how
Yes.
we started. And people at universities, young people like yourself, you need to get out of your soft cushiony and go there and just talk to them. How can the strike or finally anything? Let Azapo be visible because we are not visible. How finally the strike? I try to look for a yellow shirt or I don't see any, you know. And I'm not saying that we should try and do our thing. Maybe we don't have funding to do those things. But
Yeah.
when other people are organizing, uh, and even students when they're organizing their strikes and all of that, we need to support them. We need to be
Yeah.
there so that
Thank
they
you.
can learn and know about Tiro.
Yeah.
People don't know about, well, Steve Biko ya no ba itse ka Steve Biko ka or go na le specialist se bitswang Steve Biko ya no, which is nice, and at least ba itse ka Steve Biko. But people don't know about Tiro. People don't know about Tesi Mashinini, batho ba Modimo. People don't know about Bokhosa Seattle. They don't, you know. And we also have to try and celebrate June 16. Hey, people have taken it away from us, and we have to
Thank
recapture
you.
it. We have
Thank-
to recapture it and let it be ours.
Thanks.
Okay, Rike Memo.
All right. No, no. Thank you very much, Osnosi. I think we appreciate your injunction that the work must continue. We'll certainly do our part as Azapo and the office that I'm involved with. We will certainly share your wishes and your whatever your guidance there about what work needs to be done. You've shared quite a lot with us, comrades, who are also fading out of memory, but who also did tremendous work in the struggle. Bo comrade Jeff Dumo Bakwa. We shouldn't forget those comrades because
Hey,
they remain consistent up to the end. And when we do these memorial lectures, Comrade Tiro is just a symbolism of this narrative, this struggle. So we also need to bring them in, and would like to thank you very much that you reminded us of Bona, Libo Comrade Libo Homafole, who have passed on. Let me bring in Ndade Welile Nhlapo, who also has a very rich history and memory of that period because he was actively involved in it, to share with us about what he remembers about Tiro and maybe share with us about why it is important that we should commemorate Tiro and have occasions like this in order to inform ourselves. And Dadeweli Nhlapo, where is he? Let me unmute him. Is he unmuted?
Akisa Mobona, okay.
No, Uting, Erikimo unmute.
No. Thank you very much. I'm unmuted
Sawubona
now.
baba.
Minjalo.
Sikhona njani?
I know. Sisaphila.
Yeah, comrade Khadiete spoke very glowingly about your relationship with Tiro and the work that you did together. So we are quite appreciative of you having set aside time to spend this evening with us and share your knowledge of Tiro and the work you did together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. First, I must thank Nosi for nudging me to and sending me the details to connect.
Okay.
We're just chatting about something else yesterday, and she told me about this commemoration, which I'd also heard from Professor Sipo Mantula.
All right.
We're talking about different issues, and he also mentioned this.
All right. Okay.
And said maybe you might want to be part of that process. I said, fine, that's okay.
Yeah, I see he's also present here, Professor Mandula. Welcome, we acknowledge you, sir.
Well, let me start by saying that the first time I met Tiro was in 1972, May 1972 in Alice,
Okay.
when we met all the universities to discuss the strike at Teflop. Because by that time it was quite clear that reinstatement of Tiro was a no-no for the regime. For those who were in charge of the campus at the time. And of course, we're having the same challenges ourselves in these bush colleges in which we were pushed into.
Yes.
Having declared solidarity with the students in Teflop, taking a position that we won't go back to class until Tiro is reinstated. That was the rallying call. But then we had to meet and then be able to agree on how to coordinate this. So we went to Alice with the view of meeting at Forte. They refused to give us a space to meet there. And then we went to the Federal Seminary, just across. Dr. Stanley Mohoba and Vumin Dandala are the people who really hosted us. And Reverend Kubule, who was the head of the seminary. So at least we're able to gather there and in the 2 days discuss what to do. It became clear that the only thing that we needed to do was to take a position that says that all of us, on going back to our campuses, to mobilize our campuses, target the specific date that we'd agreed upon, and on that day have a national student boycott. Demanding. I think that's the time when the students at Teflop would be going back under the conditions that were given to them. Expected to sign certain letters of apology so that they can be reinstated. So to rally around that, and then we decided on that day we are going to have this national boycott. That was the Alice Declaration. I'm sure those who might want to look into how that declaration was worded will get a sense of the mood that was prevailing and the determination to do exactly what we had planned. Of course, we all went back to our campuses, those who were delegates, and of course, the rest is history. Those strikes took place. Even some of the white universities joined in, particularly University of Cape Town, where NUSA still had a bit of a stronghold. They joined in the strike in solidarity. Of course, we acknowledge. But let me go to Tiro. That's the first time that I met him. And then after that, we had to go back to our universities. And then, of course, different processes took place in different universities. In the end, we all had to take decisions at one point or another as to what do we do, because it was quite clear that the strikes were not going on the way in which we were determined, and some people were falling on the wayside, pressure from families, harassment from the system, and therefore they had to conform to the conditions. Some of us decided to panola. And if this is the case, better leave university and just go on and see what we can do. But then with a smart way of doing things, we said, no, let's establish branches in our communities where we are, in our regions. We had the RIF student organization, which we established in the RIF, organizing around that all the students who came from Teflop, from Goye, from Forte, who were in the townships, Mamelodi, Alexandra, Soweto, just mobilizing from there and continuing with the conscientization process, because I mean, we had long made a determination that we are blacks first before students. And that what we're experiencing in the university was a continuation of the oppression that was meted to us as black people, as part of the black community, and hence the mobilization of students. But at the same time, there was a trend that started. Some of the people who were doing education, some not necessarily, found space in the schools that they were for teaching. And they continued to teach. That's how Tiro ended up in Morris Isaacson, JT went to Orlando West. Talepule Mloto went somewhere. So there was a spread of them into this high school. And then, of course, the clear understanding was that they are going to organize the student at that high school level. Because quite clearly there were a number of challenges that students needed to be organized. Tiro then participated in that. Morris Isaacson was there with George Nene and others. They did a sterling job, just like others. Jackie and them did a very good job where they are. And the trend spread. But when the banning came in 1972 of the SASO 8, there was a challenge. How do we then begin to replace the leadership that was banned? There was a first wave of replacement. Henry Isaacs came in. No, it was first Bishop Philip as the president of SASO. Then the next wave of banning orders came, and then they were removed. And then the term of Tiro and them came with Henry Isaacson as president and Tiro as national organizer. That's when he started really continuing with the active work that Rangwezi Ndungekulu and Steve Biko were doing in organizing youth formations in the different provinces at the time, culminating in the launch of the National Youth Organization in Mancoke and the Eastern Cape, which Tiro presided upon, supported by Kumloane, Mapetla Mohapi, Tebogo Mafule, and myself, who became part of that process. And we went on and on organizing in whatever way, wherever we could, including student nurses at Paraguanas Hospital. People thought we had other interests, Gumba material. No. That was also an issue. I mean, we had to get some people to accompany us. But to organize it was a tertiary university. And we understood that. So I moved around with him to most of the universities where he was introducing himself. Ngoye, and we went to UNB, and then we went to Teflop. That's where I met Cyril for the first time, and Frank Chikan. They were part of the audience of Tiro, by the way. At the time, they organized the church as leaders of the SCM because SASO was not allowed to operate on campus. So they organized a church where they all used to have their activities. I hope they remember today that they were part of that audience, having contributed. And Tiro was able to get the message through to them and the rest of the students that were there to begin to understand where are we going. But with time going on, Bonosipo left, as she was explaining, and then we started having a challenge. Tiro had been elected as the president of Sazim, which we call the big Sazim, because we're the small one, the high school student one. So always had to make the distinction that Lucy was talking about. So the small Sazim continued with his work, but he focused on the big Sazim now. So Tiro left, as Nosi was saying. It's a pity that Khadieta has not been able to join, because Nosi, that is the person who brought the letter to us.
Yeah.
The actual letter that was intercepted in Mafikeng, in the office of
Yeah.
Mango.
Yeah.
It was Khadiet.
Kingdom. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, he's the one who brought the letter. And we sat down and discussed. We said, before, there's no two ways. You've just come back, you might better go back. And that's how we got back and then met his fate in the manner in which he did. But when some of us left subsequently after the Frelimo uprisings, ending up in Botswana, we continued to assist Jeff Pakwa, who still continued to try and establish the headquarters of SASI. You see, the other day I heard Sipho Mabuse in the memorial of Jonas Kwanga saying that the first met Jonas Kwanga in Botswana in 1974. It was a concert that was organized by ourselves. And Jeff Porter was in the center of that. Brought in Bokefas, Jonas, Dudu Pukwan, and all that group. For the first time, they came to perform in our region. That's when Jonas even took a decision to stay in Botswana. Many people don't know that. They had come there because we were raising funds for the establishment of the headquarters of SASIM in Botswana, which Jeff Pakwa was trying to continue to contribute towards ensuring that that movement lives on, with the hope that there will be some reorganization and somebody will be elected, but the secretariat will be established and functioning. So I think Nosi is correct. You know, for the students in South Africa and in this region to get themselves organized around SASIM, and what became another center of that organization were the support for the struggle in South Africa, mobilizing of the student youth. SASIM was also affiliated to the All Africa Student Union, which was established in Ghana, Kumasi, around the same period. So SASIM became part of the All Africa Student Union, part of the continental movement, because at the time of the Cold War, those dictatorships, students were finding it very difficult. These dictators were really kicking students around. So it was organizing in the continent also against those dictatorships and being in contact with the students and mobilizing them in support of our own struggle. So I think it is in that context that heroes should be understood, and that he could have gone very far and his life was cut short. My own humble opinion, and others, old as you might think we are, we must organize, mobilize, and teach the students about this system. There's a program that I'm involved in every year with teaching of SRC leaders in conflict resolution since the Black Must Fall movement, so that they can understand how to engage in negotiations and to resolve the conflicts that they have on campus, but also to begin to function as student representative bodies rather than party political functionaries and representatives on campus, because that becomes their major weakness. Their representative capacity, their unity becomes weakened. It's been quite successful up to now because you get to understand what their thinking is, what their challenges is, how they see things. Last week, we finished another one with just youth. again, in a way to try and get them to this kind of activity. I'm linked up with a movement that I'm working with, a think tank. We are in touch with the All Africa Student Union. We worked partly with them, those who initiated the reformation. So the All Africa Student Union is back, functioning. It has been re-established last year.
Okay.
And I believe that what we need to do is to work towards the re-establishment of SASEM, to make those links, to re-affiliate once again to this All Africa Students Union, because that's the only way we can link our students with the processes and movements that are taking place on the continent. And of course, to be able to encourage our students here at home to organize themselves in a manner in which their strategies and tactics will be fit for purpose, operating in a very different atmosphere and arena. Our struggle is being stolen. We're the very people that were raising fists high at some point, shouting slogans. They still continue to do so. But it's our duty to make sure that Tiro's name continues. And I believe let's work on that project. And once SASEM is re-established, posthumously, we can fight and nominate Tiro as a patron of the student movement. That is how we can keep his name alive, his legacy alive, student struggles alive. Thank you. I'm sorry I took a bit of time, but I was just being thrown into the deep end. And I said, for Tiro's sake, I will respond in the manner in which I'm doing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You actually responded comprehensively, as if you weren't just nashed today to come and speak, but we expected that from you, because from what Comrade Nosi had told me as we were preparing for this discussion, and what Comrade Khanyete had also told me when he apologized that he can't be with us, he said, no, you are more than a capable replacement, because you're a former organizer as well with, I think, I don't know, at Sasso, I don't know if you took after Tiro or what had happened, but he said that no, you are quite a capable replacement. And thanks for sharing with us that very rich history. I think it's the first time that I hear about the Alice Declaration. So, Majuta, there's something for you guys to pursue there as historians. Maybe link up with Ndaten Sapo to see if we can get hold of a copy of that document and share it with our young people. And also that NIO was launched at Mount Cope. It's one of the BCM structures that has been written very little about. But we know that it produced some very iconic leaders like Comrades Kap Motsau, and I think the current speaker of the national, what do they call, National Council of Provinces, Comrade Masondo, also comes from NIO. So we hope that we will produce more historians who will say, well, maybe a little bit more has been written about SASO and maybe BPC and others. Let's try and focus on NIO and see who led it, how they did it, and what is contributions in our liberation history is.
Moemedi, can I
Yeah.
just say something quick, just a
Yeah.
sentence?
Yes, ma'am.
That history is history, and
Yes.
we cannot change history. What
Yeah.
happened in history happened, and what we need to do also is to write the correct stories. Sa history ya rona.
All
Our
right.
background here, BCM, has to be written properly. People cut and paste themselves
Yeah.
where they were not. And that person was nowhere to be found. Maybe we nearly party assisting, but anyway, history is history and you cannot change history.
Yeah. No, thank you very much, Osnosi. Let me at this point also bring in, I see we've got about 23. We were at some point at 29 people participating here. So we've got quite a representative audience, both young and old comrades who also spend time with Tiro and yourselves, mobilizing, organizing. I see the former president of Zapo, Kim Melani, if I'm not mistaken. She's also here. She was probably at that Alice meeting. That comrade Vuisa Kunta used to tell us so much about how inspirational Tiro was in his address at that meeting. And he said to us one of the quotes that is often attributed to Steve. It is better to 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 live for to die for an idea that will live than to live for an idea that will die. He said he had he had Comrade Unkupese Tiro actually use it for the first time at that Alice meeting where he was in attendance. And I think Ndade Nsapu has just expanded on where it was held, how it happened, and all of that. So that's something was writing about in history, because that sounded like quite an important meeting that produced that Alice declaration. During the Fees Must Fall, some of us who often write short narratives on the student movement, which is where we come from, also reminded the Fees Must Fall movement that the first national shutdown of universities in South Africa happened actually around 1972, 1973, when students at the universities boycotted classes and shut down universities in solidarity with Tiro. But let me give an opportunity to our participants here. Anyone who would like to perhaps make a contribution, ask a question, expand on what has been said, what they may know about Tiro. This is your opportunity to interact with our presenters and to also make your comments. If you can, please raise your hand, but if you can't raise your hand, let's just try and be orderly, and we will attend to those questions and comments. So this is your opportunity, dear friends and comrades. Anyone who would like to bail the cat, just unmute yourself and make a comment or ask a question. I'm trying to check if I have anyone. All right. Is there someone? Okay, Ndade Nyati, you can go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity for being part of this wonderful presentation. As a young person determined to grow in the field of academia, I've learned one or two things. Honestly, I didn't know much about Tiro until I met Mojuda, who was so keen in investigating the life and times of this revolutionary who fought against a very oppressive and cruel regime. Now, what I've learned is that the information maybe does not reach the desired audience, which appears that we were so keen to write as young academics, the academics who have been in the field for some time, they write. But the question we might ask ourselves is, do we get the audience that we desire? Now, I will make a submission that Mojuda touched on this a little, to say we need to go to this audience. It is not enough to write, because we often use this big English that the desired audience sometimes do not understand.
Yeah.
Now, how do we then reach them? The submission I would like to make is workshops, in particular in townships and in rural areas, are necessary so that we can reach as large audience as possible to ensure that we revive the Black consciousness. It is true that many of our people do not understand Black consciousness. Yes, they have heard about Steve Biko, they have heard the concept Black consciousness, but do they understand it? What does it mean? Do Africans accept themselves? Do they love themselves to an extent that they reject cultures that seek to compromise the African identity? That is my submission, comrade, and thank you very much.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Yeah, I think, and I hope that that's a challenge we will embrace. It's actually quite an important submission you are making, that we've got to go outside of what Comrade Muntumi has called the rarefied offices and atmospheres from which we work, and go into the rural areas, much like Sasso did. I mean, it is a credit to what Comrade Manena, Comrade Mpotseng, who are also here, did, because they built that clinic in a very rural area in next to Ginsberg. And they also built schools in Hammanskraal, they built schools in Zanin, places that are not normally served by established authority. And Comrade Mujuda, in his presentation, did say that, in fact, it is in the rural areas where you see the spirit of Black consciousness, of self-reliance being exemplified. The many schools today which are now regarded as public schools, I think if communities were to rise up, will end up as private schools, because those are schools that were built by communities through contribution. One donating a cow there, another one a goat there, another one a chicken there, and schools were built. We speak to schools such as probably Hebron. I know I went to a school in Lomanyaneng where in the 80s, there was still a building fund that we had to contribute to if you wanted to be admitted to that school, even though it was built in the 70s. But subsequently, most of those schools were taken over by government. The same goes for public hospitals. Most of these public hospitals that you see in the rural areas could qualify to be private hospitals, but they are communal, they are public. So what we are trying to say is, today when we speak about private schools such as Institutions, your top private schools, we often forget that, no, it's Black people that actually led the way by building their own institutions in Alice, in Hilltown, and Adams College in KZN. So it's important that we have this kind of history to teach and remind one another about our own contributions to the history of education and such that. But I don't know if any of the panelists want to respond to this input by Patrick Nyati. If any one of you is available, please come in. But Comrade Kamohelo, I see your hand is up. Please come in. Maybe we should take 2 or 3 questions at a go.
Okay, thank you, Comrade Moemedi, and good evening to everybody. What an inspiring and wonderful presentation by the people that knew Diro. Comrade Moemedi, I'm sorry, I cannot put my video on. I'm not in a video-friendly place, so
no, that's fine. We want your voice more than anything else, yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, and thank you so much, Tate Mujuda, Mr. Tate Welile, Osnosi. What a mind-boggling and inspiring presentation with regards to Diro. We read so much about him and we think we know about him, but hearing from the horse's mouth, as you are the horses, it becomes even more clearer and more inspiring. When one looks at the speech that Tiro gave that made him to be banned, that Tewilile says that is not the speech. Yes, but that is not what made him to be banned. But looking at that speech, a very powerful speech, and when you take that speech and when you take what he addressed at that graduation ceremony and you put it into the context of today, one finds that so little has changed in terms of the system that really perpetuated those oppressions on Black students and what the system, even under Black leadership, is doing with regards to especially from the education side, with what it is being done to Black students and Black people. You find that access to education is still a very big milestone for Black rural, not even only rural people, students to achieve or to get. It is still a very big problem for Black people to access education. The fees must fall. I agree, they took from the teachings and the movement that Tiro led to say that how can we still in this era have such obstacles, have such obstructions in front of us when we want to get education and so on. You also look at his speech, one sentence that really keeps coming to my mind of that speech where he says, the so-called leaders, he was talking about the apartheid leadership. But when I look at it, when I internalize it, it still talks to the leaders of today, that the so-called leaders who are saying that they are for education of all, but they are not giving access for all or to all. It becomes difficult to say, or it becomes difficult for Black students to access education as opposed to how others who are privileged in terms of finances and all that, and it is not Black students that are getting that. The other thing will be when we look at the history that our learners are taught in school, in our schooling system. Osnosi talked about history that should be written so that we all know what really happened and everything. When you look at the history books or the history curriculum in schools that are taught or that is taught from primary school even to university, you find very, very little that is taught about Tiro. You find snippets about Biko, you find snippets about Sobukwe, you find little or nothing on Tiro, but in his speech was very emphatic about what the education system should be like. So I am really saddened that we are having this conversation in 2021, but we still see the same things that Tiro fought for or fought against, still rearing their ugly heads even more when years go on and on. You find exorbitant fees that are charged or that are put as registration, as study fees, and those are not afforded by our Black people cannot afford those. You find so many marginalization with regards to education for Black people. So we also need, as we educate our young people about the history, but we also need to educate them that we need a revolution to make sure that the education system and the leaders in our government must do more for the majority of our country. We are now heading for a very difficult and dangerous time where we now see more foreign nationals getting into parliament. And now we are afraid that education and history, it is going to be at a peril where we'll find that what we are thinking should be taught in our schools is actually going to be not taught at all. If there was little that was started to say that let there be some small thing about Biko, small things about Tiro or Sobukwe, they will dissipate, and we'll find now will be being the history will find ourselves our schools and our universities will now be more on the Chinese history, the German history, will be reversing instead of going forth. It is a crucial and a dangerous space that we find ourselves in as South Africans, that we are allowing all these things to happen. As we revolutionize education, we need to start with the people. We need to start with the people that are leading the country, or we need to start with the system that is leading the country. It needs to be overhauled. We need an overhaul of a system that is governing in our country, that is not for our people, but for other people, and a little part in that is for Black people and the indigenous people of this country. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Advocate Sipomandula, I saw your hand earlier. If you still want to pose a question, please go ahead.
Good evening. The leadership here to still keep the fires burning, to remember Ramutibi Abraham Tiro. I think one of the contributions which I want to agree with the elders, the power of education in oral history. These sessions, I hope, as we are archiving them, we are able to work around on the part of oral history in the basic education. I picked up what people are saying, but the school named after Tiro, Sesekoma Pigen, Slari, they don't even do social science, what you are calling history or her story or our story. We need to do the tracking and tracing of Tiro's journey. We can't locate Tiro to TEF alone. When Ntate Ntlapa Bulele ka Soweto, we can't leave Lebaro alone. We can't leave the continent, more so the history, Yaka Ramutibi. It was not located in one space. Including Lego Dinokana, we can't go further by saying that even the other form of education is that documentaries and films of Tiro, why are they so low? Why are we not beyond the lectures? Why are we not having practical solutions that can address our education system? But the last point is the justice for Tiro and TAT. I think that's what we are trying to avoid, not to get into it. To say, but who really killed Tiro and what was the reason behind? You might have TRC files, they might be hot, they might be censored, they might be classified. But we need to get into the justice project as well, because coincidentally, Tiro, we are talking about him. Today I was talking about Eduardo Wakamontlana, that he was killed by the parcel bomb on this day in 1969. But here we are talking about 1974. But Eduardo was on the 3rd of February. So you might ask yourself if we don't get into the justice project as well, because many of our leaders, they will go through the same route. It might not be the same parcel note or a study material, but there might be many forms of eliminating some of our thinkers. But I agree, Lerenta, for the issue of resuscitating our history with the young people. We should never shy away. But the media as well, we should not shy away from engaging our public media, our community media, wherever we are. We cannot be confined to only social media. We should still remember that the power of radio in our languages, to can read Tiro speech in our different languages, it is very important. It's not tribal, it's not ethnic. And I think that's my contribution. Northwest Province, Gauteng Province, Limpopo, they need to come up with a joint program, as well as the national government, to come up with a program, not only about the statue. We don't need even statues, we are not the culture of statues only, but we need a culture of bursaries for Bana. We need books of even people who lived with Tiro, because many strike, we need their volume 1, volume 2, so that they can be in the schools. I think Tawa
Okay, I don't think there's time to take any more questions, but if there's someone who is very pressed to make a comment after Ndade Mandula, I'll just use my discretion and stretch it a bit. So is there anyone that wants to come in? Please just be brief with that, and then I'll hand over to our panelists to respond and to make their closing remarks.
When I
wait, Emapele, who's no si go na le mongwe o batlang go tshwaela mo? Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, everybody. It is true for Ndate Tiro is a representation of many. And on that note, Kiratole Wukhabo Osnosi, Wontate Welile, and many others that are not here today, that fought for the air that we breathe today. As the beneficiaries of your work, we really appreciate it. You might not hear it a lot, but some of us really, really appreciate it. And we would love to honor you. And to Mujuta, Kirato Leboha, his contribution to this beautiful evening today, and bringing us forward to us as this generation and what it is we see in society today, and how part of what we need to do and the genesis of moving forward is resting somewhere in healing. It is key that we find healing. Society is torn up today. We are struggling with the work that was not finished. That's what we're struggling with today. So for us to find and chart a way forward as this generation, we must take it upon ourselves as well. Generation Yabontate Tiro, Yabontate Welile, like Libo Usno Sibacho Bari, they did what they could, and Unajari Banaba Batlore Giringi Haki Fitako. So it is on our shoulders that we should put another brick on the foundation that they gave us.
Sure.
And just to them, Giratori, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I think you speak for all of us in expressing that gratitude and appreciation.
To emphasize one thing when Moemedi Khore. During the PCM, when we worked, we were not working because we wanted the awards or we wanted the accolades. We did what we did because we had to do it for the Black people. And this is why we were successful 1972 up to go 1976. And people still need, students still need guidance as to what is the vision and what is it that they want to achieve from one of these things. And, we are still there, irrespective of and all of that, but we are still there.
Thank you. Okay, are those your closing remarks, Menosi?
Hey.
Thank you, Raliboha. Let me go to Ndate Welile to make his closing remarks. Is he still here?
Yes, I'm still around and alive.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone for the comments that they've made. We've taken note of them. And like Nossi is saying, I think we are available. One thing, nice to be a pensioner if you know what you want in life. you can always think about the best things to do and to make sure that life continues and you can continue to contribute. Because I think the first thing that Gaugelo said, Kamogelo, if I got it right, it's correct. It's correct. I think this is what should motivate us. We can't be satisfied that we can vote, we can have freedom of speech, association, and all these technical organizational matters about democracy and freedom of all of these things. There's much more to it. And I think that is a challenge that we have to stand up to. And it is our responsibility to do so. We have to do it. You know, just one thing. I think part of the problem that we are faced with in this continent, and particularly in this country, outside of the South African exceptionalism, which sometimes misguides our thinking, there is a serious problem with this continent, South Africa not being an exception, a leadership deficit. Everybody believing that things begin with them. There is no continuity. Challenges that we could be dealing with are left hanging or dropped somewhere along the way because people are still trying to find a better life for themselves, not for the people, better life for themselves. It's a big challenge. You see, at the time when I was off a bit, I was talking to somebody who was telling me about the new challenge that is now arising with the election of the new leadership in the African Union. Somebody saying that there should be no election because their candidate is not having a good shot. So some of these small things, they impact negatively on our development all around. Then you ask yourself, where is South Africa in this whole process?
Yes.
So there are serious challenges, and I think this is what we need to take up and begin to deal with very firmly. With the little energy that is left, we have to.
No, thank you. But from your presentation tonight, it looks like you still pack a lot of energy and the mind is still fresh. So we'll keep calling on you in that support to share and to help in guiding our youth, us and society at large. Comrade Mojuta, you were our main presenter for the evening, so it is appropriate that you are the last one to speak so that and just to say thank you to you once again. But go ahead and do your closing remarks, and if you need to respond to the questions, please.
Bagolo, ke leboga go Menagane to Azapo for giving us this opportunity and also trusting us with this mandate, and also for recognizing that we are here and we are ready to do the work and we are willing to work with other people. Just a brief answering of an engagement with some of the questions. I think with what Mr. Nyati has said about reaching the right audience, it's very important. And there are already Black people who are doing the work, people in places like Salt Lake University who are translating books and work into Setswana. They have projects where they repatriate some of the works in English, like Salt Lake's work in English. I forgot the writer's name, Mokaye and Lorato Trok. So there are people who are already doing the work of translating and taking work from English into our own languages. And also, it's a challenge for us as scholars as well to say it's not just enough to write in English. We have to work with experts in African languages and actually translate our work so that they can be accessible to the majority of our people. To reiterate again, the workshops are necessary, but in our little corners we can do so much. But also in moving forward, we must take the bold steps of actually forming institutions and organizations where we can archive, where we can, I'm inspired by the African American community because they have archived so much. I mean, there was a program in the 1930s in America where they called it the Slave Project, where they went around just documenting people who were of slave descendants and actually getting the history. Because for some of us, the challenge is now as we do this history, even now, as I said, that there's so much to write about our luminaries and our people. But once the older generation goes, they go with the library. So we must just sometimes do projects where we interview Black consciousness luminaries like Me, Machoba, and Ntate Nhlapo, because it's important that we capture their work. And also someone else in the next generation might come and say, look, I want to do a gender analysis of Black consciousness. And here's the work of people like Deborah Machoba and what they've left us, So workshops and all these other interventions are necessary, but we must never fear to do a national coordination of our things. We must never fear to say Black History Society, Black Scholars Forum, where we advance, where, as scholars, we say to each other to say, look, students need bursaries. You are working, you've got pensions and whatever else. Leave money behind so that students can benefit as well. As long as we are still in the system, we need to find a way to make it work for us. I mean, in America, they've got, I forgot the name, but it's a fund, the Black what fund, where they come together as Black people and give bursaries to students to go to universities. Fees Must Fall, I was also involved there as a participant on the ground. And I must agree that, some of the gains that were made have been reversed. But I'm grateful that it happened because it conscientized a lot of students and it actually opened up the discussion on decolonization. But we must never forget where we come from. As the elders have said to us, to say, it didn't start with your generation. Look to the past so that you can be inspired and not to give up. Because for some of us, it's easy to say, well, Black consciousness died with the bannings in 1977. But as we read deeper into our history, we realize that Black consciousness is alive and kicking, and it was there, it was flourishing in the 1980s, So it's easy because the mass media, the information that is being peddled about Black consciousness is one where it's sought to institutionalize it, to take it out of its radical Black community beginnings, and also to just center it around Steve Biko as if his ideas were not sharpened by his comrades. So we must guard against that cultism where, a few individuals represent Black consciousnness. We must look for those stories. Mapetla Mohapi, we must go to places like Josana's Hook. We must find Bomtulika Shezi and their families, what's happening. Because for me, it was important to speak to the family of Nkgoposetiro, the sister, the brother, the aunt, and as tough as it is, as there are contradictions, but it's important to know their families and to realize that in them, the spirit also lives in their families. Meka Mogelo spoke about things still being the same. It is a tragedy that, as things change, some stay the same. And for us as historians, we're looking at change over time. We must be cognizant of the fact that we still have a long way to go as a Black community, and we look up to the invocation of Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, as he says to us, organize, 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 because we can never be comfortable in being the only ones. We can never be comfortable in having a seat at the table. We must disrupt the table. We must make sure that we take the table to the Black communities. We take the table to our people. And also, the history curriculum, it's interesting that in 2023, history is going to be made a compulsory subject. And for some of us, we actually looking at how for me, it's important that I go into the Nukana, the community of Nkgopotshetiro and Mahikeng as well, and actually speak to the districts, the education districts and the circuits, and actually see how we can have a program incorporating people like Nkgopotshetiro around issues like June 16, around the curriculum, and actually say to them, look, we can do a booklet, we can do a small, you know, something so that the young people in those communities are there. I've seen so much being done with the legacy of Nkgopotshetiro, but, you know, the Nukana itself, those environments themselves on June 16, on these commemorative days, they are very silent. And it's a cause for concern that we've neglected the deep work of actually tracing our people to where they come from. It's not necessarily ethnocentrism or tribalism. You know, it's more to say, look, we need to acknowledge who we are and our ethnicity, you know, to say, where do we come from as a people? And once we appreciate, then we will be able to realize that it's important for us to know all the languages. It's important for us to respect each other's cultures. It's important to critique shows and stories on TV that seek to portray that, okay, when you watch shows like Uzalo, it's like it's a Zulu-centric show. Whereas if you go to Mlazi, you'll find Basotho, you'll find Zulu people living with different ethnic groups. So we must seek to fight against the demon of tribalism. We must exorcise that demon and actually say, you know, this is not the reality on the ground. The reality on the ground is that Black people are speaking to each other in the different languages. I come from the community of Alexandra, and in Alexandra, you know, I don't have a mother tongue. Ke Motswana, but I ke kgone bua Setswana se se tlhapileng ka gore ke godile mo gare ga batho ba bantsi. You know, and for me, that is very important that we also recognize that dialects are important. We don't look down on certain dialects. You know, people like the Mapulana people in Limpopo, we need to tell their history and actually say, look, these communities have a history that needs to be told. Let's move away from the dominant narrative as well in our Black communities and ethnicities to say, in KZN, it's only Zulu people. In KZN, you find Ngunis of different dialects, of different ethnicities. Where are the Ndwandwe? Do we speak about the Ndwandwe, the Zizi, the Dlamini? There's so many different peoples. Eastern Cape, same thing. You know, not only Amathosa, there's different communities in the Eastern Cape. The Mpondo have their own history. So we need to really work on how we can bring back identity and dig deeper. You know, the colonialists, the ethnographers, the white scholars, they did a basic survey. Our job is even harder because now, whatever contradictions we find in communities, I mean, already in the Botswana communities, of what I'm finding is that the dominant communities who are stronger militarily are the ones who've been documented. We need to document other communities. Like there's a community in a place called Mabiskran, you know, the Batlaku, the Batlaku people. Their history has not been told, and it dawns upon us as historians to actually go into these rural communities and actually start doing the difficult work, you know, and also documenting the contradictions to say, how can you say Northwest is a Tswana province, but you find the Amahlubi in Rustenburg, Kayakulu, you know, Amatrina in Ziras as well. So we must look into those stories and actually disrupt the dominant narrative of Bantustans as actually being the narrative of Black communities since the 1960s. Then Ntate Mantula, I agree with him about solutions. You know, our work is not just theoretical musings. Our work is rooted in actually practical reality. Nkgopotshetiro spoke about practical reality, and it's something that must drive us to actually say, you know, yes.
Okay, Majuta, try and wrap it up. We were supposed to have ended at 8, so I don't want to be unkind to my participants. So we have about 11 minutes. We'll extend it by 30 minutes. So let's end it at 2030, but I'm not stopping you. Just try and wrap it. We will find another occasion where you can speak broadly about history. But thank you very much for those insights. Yeah.
So we need to find justice, and wherever we are, let's work together. Let's push for that. And also, I'm also working on trying by the end of this year to translate the speech into Setswana so that it can also be accessible to different communities, and working with others to translate into other languages. The last point I want to make is about healing, and I just want to go back to Mayor KP Ndlovu to say, one of our struggle icons, Solomon Mahlangu, every year the family has to slaughter an animal because his spirit is still wandering around. The spirit is not at ease because of the way the apartheid regime killed him. And this is part of the spiritual work of healing ourselves as Black communities, to say some of our people, in looking for that justice, is also to say finding closure for families so that the spirits can also be at peace. Comrades, thank you very much, and I hope we can keep the conversation and the discussions going, because it does not end here. Every year we need to revisit and actually continue the work on Black history, continue the work on Black historiography, and making our own contributions as Black people to the discussions, and making sure that we leave a solid legacy for the next generation so that we can eradicate the legacies of Bantu education, because Bantu education sought to render our people as hewers of wood and drawers of water. And we are railing against that system, and calling on the elders to say, you've managed in spite of that system. And we want to work with you and learn from you, even if you went through that Bantu education, because even people like Nkupata Tiro were in the Bantu education system, but they came out of it and work together and forge a new path. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that very passionate and inspirational and informative address. You've touched it, particularly towards the end of this last presentation, the various sub-themes that we can consider as we uncover, and as I like to say, represent Black history, because our history has to be represented, because most of what you read about is how other people saw us and the narrative that they wanted to share with us. There is a book here which I picked up in my little travels in the US then as a young student. I really made it a point that in my travels, I collected rare books that we can't find here in South Africa. It's just that the face has been torn. I have little boys who have grown up now, but I used to make them read this. But it talks about Black history for beginners. Ultimately, we should get to a point where we produce books like this, because in this book, what the African Americans were trying to do was to present their own history, talk about, the Olympics, the Julian Bonds, who headed the Black delegation to the Democratic Convention in Chicago in 1968. Huey Newton is there, and many of the Malcolm X is also there. So this is the kind of history, documents, booklets that we can produce, because it's not enough to say we want to mainstream it in education. If the doors are not going to open, we can actually initiate and embark on projects like that. It's a book that is fairly accessible, presentable. You can see it's almost like a pictorial book, but with narratives there and there. So I just really want to encourage us that part of this Black History Month is to collect our history and ultimately, hopefully, get those who are interested to write some material out of it. Mujuta, thank you very much. I hope that you will be able to convert your honors mini dissertation into a book at some stage, because it needs to be generally available and not just be restricted to the marshy rooms and cupboards of academia. But continue doing the work, comrades. We really admire you and are quite impressed that somebody as young as you had a presence of mind not to be directed by your supervisors and researchers, because we know that that's what happens a lot in academia, and they get you to really do research on subjects that don't bear relevance and have resonance with your own background and your own reality. And we commend you for having chosen to particularly focus your work on Tiro. Comrades, let me thank you all for attending this evening, but also remind you that we are going to be rolling out this program for the month of February. We hope to host seminars, webinars like this on Wednesdays, and if we can, also maybe one of the days during the weekends, if some of our presenters can't make it on a Wednesday. But just to share with you what we have in the menu. On the 6th, we're hoping to deal with the history of Black scientists and inventors. We are reaching out to our Black scientists here at home, on the continent, and in the diaspora to feature in that program, just so that they can talk to us about that side of our history. On the 10th, we have a purview into Black medicine and therapeutic and the therapeutic heritage. So there are comrades who are professors in academia that we are talking to, and we are asking them to participate. And on Saturday, the 13th, if we can, we will also take a look on the subject of economic history and the role of Black people. We also want to have a session on mathematics and technology, because those people are there, and Black people have been making contributions at IBM. They've been involved in coding and a whole lot of stuff, but we're not exposed, or that history is not exposed to our kids at school and at universities. And then we will look at Black literature and cinema. We hope to invite some practitioners there. And then we will also take a look at the history of Black ideology and practice. Where do Black people begin in developing ideas or ideology? Because often when we go to university, we read about Karl Marx and we read about the liberal thinkers, but we haven't packaged documents on Black ideology and practice. And we're hoping that these sessions will help us to develop a compendium. And on Saturday, the 28th February, it will just really be a celebration. We're hoping to invite through some of our musicians to come and talk about Black musicology and art. And hopefully they will also perform for the audience. So keep joining in when you see our invites and enrich these discussions. Let me thank you. Let me say Kamago and Ngomso. Let's keep on, supporting these projects and activities. Kyalo leboga comrades for joining in. But as we move out, let me play this poetic tribute to remind ourselves of our history. Hey, am I doing it correctly? Wait. I want to go to share screen. There we go. Is it playing there?
The visual is there, but the audio is not there.
The audio is not there. Maybe the audio is from my side. Let me see. I don't understand. Okay, if you need to log off, you can log off, because it was just a bit of entertainment for us.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you,
So
Moemedi.
you can't still get the audio, eh? Yeah, thank you, Mujuta. Thank you, Osnosi. Thank you, Ndatewe Welile. Ralo Leboha.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Leave.
Oh, the audio. I can see now. Can you hear it now? Not. What's wrong? Bye-bye.
Foi feliz. Foi feliz. Nna ne ke sa batle gore ba mpone ka gabo.
Ra go bona. Ra go utlwa.
Hey, nna ke bo America rra.
Eh, a utlwa ware lo sa batle gore ba go bona, ra go bona.
Batho mo modimo, ai technology ke sa loud wait.
The technology e Osnosi.
Ai batho. Ka bona mpontshitse gore ke presse mo kae gore ba se ke ba mpona.
Wa bua Stringo. Eh, ke a go utlwa.
Bua le dust dithole kwa America kwa ke re le ena nka buile le lonto.
Le nna nka be ke sa
Buile.
Ai, next time.
Dithole wa Thebe.
Eh.
Or tla mo tsenya le me Nombulelo Melani ke a mmona Q.
Eh.
Eh, ba tla tsena next time.
Ra leboga, good job guys. We really
Okay.
appreciate this.
All right. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining in and sharing.
Yeah. Thanks
Thank
to
you,
Tidi Muroka. She's always updating me.
All right. Okay. Thank you. No, President, thank you for joining in and
All right, my child. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Comrade Strike.
Ula dithole.
Yeah.
In the US, in the UK.
Huh?
Britain.
Oh, okay. Ya ke mone last time ka ele yabo kunta.
La tlotla yano.
Na go siame.
Ke tshaba go tima bagolo.
Nya go siame rra.